Hey guys, this is Sean Kanan, and you are listening to the Then Is Now podcast.
Rise and shine, my sinners. When Father Evil starts his day, he gets a little deadly. Deadly Grounds coffee has the richest, smoothest flavor you'll find anywhere. It's sinfully delicious. Once you go deadly, you never go back. Order yours at getdeadly.com. Coffee's so good, it's scary.
What kind of a sick school is this?
Uh-oh, don't know!
Strange things are afoot at the Circle K.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious, and don't call me Shirley.
You got spunk. I hate spunk.
Danger, Will Robinson. Danger.
Oh, righty.
How you doing?
Back off, man. I'm a scientist.
Don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
Say hello to my little friend!
I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
What are you people? On dope?
Stop whining.
I got a crap on deck that could choke a donkey.
Who is your daddy?
I'm sorry, but all questions must be submitted in writing.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Can I do that?
I'll be back.
A dynamite! Show me the money!
Don't!
Up your nose when you rub a hose.
A what? I'm sailing! I'm sailing!
Groovy.
You want the moon? Just say the word and I'll throw a lasso around it and pull it down.
Love means never having to say you're sorry.
Here's looking at you, kid.
We got no food, we got no jobs, our pets' heads are falling off!
Come to the coast and get together, have a few laughs.
Hear that, Elizabeth? I'm coming to join you, honey!
I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV.
I love it when a plan comes together.
What we do is if we need that extra push over the cliff, you know what we do?
Put it up to
11, exactly. One louder.
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These go to 11.
We're on a mission from God.
Hello and welcome to this special mini episode of Then Is Now podcast. I am your host Re-Gor and I'm flying solo again today, but I've got a couple of awesome guests who are no stranger to Then Is Now. They are George and Gene, the masterminds behind the Drive-In Monster-Rama and the April Ghouls Drive-In Monster-Rama, held each year in the fall and April at Riverside Drive-In in Vandergrift, Pennsylvania. Each April and September they play 4 horror films on a Friday and Saturday, so you get 8 great classic horror films, some of which you may never have seen. So listen to George and Gene as they tell us about the cool films they have coming up this year. Class is in session.
I have a bad feeling about this.
How could I possibly be expected to handle school on a day like this?
Food fight!
Hey, you in my class? I am today.
I think you should consider transferring to shop class. Now, very few students are severely injured in shop class.
Bueller.
When you were in school,
Bueller.
did you ever cut class?
Bueller. Yeah, I guess I did. Sure, most kids cut classes.
Good, sign this. He's sick.
I get so lonely when I hear that third attendance bell ring and all my kids are not here.
7 years of college down the drain.
Fat, drunk, and stupid is no way to go through life, son.
You lack discipline.
As long as I'm here, there will be no grades or gold stars or demerits. We're gonna have recess all the time. Woo! Go, play, and have fun now!
Welcome back to the show, guys.
Good evening.
Thanks for having us.
Oh, thanks for coming. I'm glad to have you guys on the show.
Yeah, always a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I always have to point out that George is the mastermind behind these. And then he started...
Well, I don't like to
started
brag,
the fall
but-
one 16 years ago. He was the first to do this. And I'm just very thankful that I'm part of the production and part of the whole family to be involved in this. So, you know, I mean, credit's due for the good things I do, I suppose, but I just want everyone to know that George is the mastermind here. So the world revolves around George's movies on those weekends, and he picks the best films, I think, out for everyone to see. So,
Gene actually we did a lot of brainstorming with this April, and I think Gene was instrumental in coming up with this year's lineup, because we were talking about so many different possible titles for April. We wanted it to be good. We wanted it to be 80s, because the 80s in April, we did an 80s, we call it Back to the 80s weekend last April, and I said, I'm going to do it. That weekend, it was so successful, he said, we're doing it again next April, so that was just an instant, we were instantly going to do it again a year later, another 80. I have to say, most of the April Ghouls do incorporate a number of 80s films, but we want to emphasize that decade with this show, and here we are doing it again. And we had so many different possibilities in mind, because we were trying to get, we were talking about maybe getting certain guests. We had a few guests in mind. Most of them were not available that weekend, so it didn't work out. So we kind of switched things around, and we needed something, headline films, and that's where Evil Dead 2 came in, and Re-Animator, and Halloween 2. And we fleshed out the schedule. Gene could talk a little bit more about how we incorporated midnight and effects.
Yeah.
Right. So why don't you tell us the whole lineup first, and then we'll get into the details.
So Friday, April 29th, we have Halloween 2 and Terror Train, which turns out to be Jamie Lee Curtis start-off double feature for the weekend. Nice. And then we end the night with the third feature, Midnight, John Russo's Midnight, produced by Sam Sherman and Independent International. And the last film is Effects. Now, Midnight and Effects were shot in Pittsburgh, so they're local to the area. They also have Tom Savini's credited to them. He did effects for both. I think he's actually appears in Effects in a small role. And so we're trying to bring a little horror history back to the area on the drive-in screen. Because a lot of people are not overly familiar. A lot of fans, I would say, are not overly familiar with those two titles.
And I just want to clarify for the listeners: Effects is spelled. It's the word effects, not F/X. The film with Brian Brown.
Yeah, not the Brian Brown. Brian Dennehy film from 1985, 6.
Yeah.
Now this is exactly. This is Effects. Actually, it was shot in the late 70s, but it's mostly given the year 1980. I think if you look it up on IMDb, it gives it as 1980. That was the major year of its release. So we're counting as an 80s film. I mean, it works as an 80s film, so that's why it's part of an 80s weekend.
Right.
And
so Midnight and Effects are two of the films in your lineup that I have not seen, and shame on me, I'm not going to be able to get there this year. Can you guys tell us about those films?
That just proves what I said. And nothing against you. It's just they're not over. I mean, they have their fans. But they're not over. It's not something. They're not two titles that are overly familiar with, horror fans.
Right.
So,
no, they're not. What? And the thing about it is, with the lineup for that night in particular, is that, you have two top films in the beginning, and then the third and fourth one, when you plan these weekends, you could do 4 big seller movies, or you could do, several movies that are very top 40-esque horror films, and something a little more underground. And the thing about Midnight and Effects was, it's never been shown. These films have never been shown back-to-back at a drive-in. This is the first time ever. And they really honestly weren't films that were highly visible over the last 20 or 30 years. And the interesting thing about it, for instance, you have, he's talking about the movie Midnight. I rented it at a local Giant Eagle grocery store, I believe, back in the day, believe it or not. And that was driving around in the late 80s, early 90s looking for the filming locations. And the same thing as for Effects. I didn't really see Effects until probably 2 or 3 years ago off of a VHS copy. And, you have John Amplis, which of course everyone knows who John is. And John went on to do quite a few George Romero films and other movies. So you've got John, in Midnight. You have John Russo that worked on Night of the Living Dead and some other films, responsible for this movie. And then in effects, you have Joe Pilato, which is no longer with us. He was, of course, a villain in Day of the Dead. You have John Harrison, and you have, which I think didn't John show up in, John Harrison showed up in quite a few other films. Wasn't he in Creepshow, I think? I can't remember. Probably.
I think so, yeah.
You have him. Yeah, you have him show up, and then, of course, you have Deborah Gordon. And she has a pretty prominent role in this film. She was in, I believe, Bloodsucking Pharaohs of Pittsburgh. She's a local actress, which has done an amount of work as well. So, and this is an interesting story, and not to sound, elitist here, egotistical, but I was out to dinner at a dinner party about a month or so ago, and I sat next to Russ Striner, and Russ and I were talking about, local movies and everything. And I told him, I said, we're going to run Midnight in Effects back to back and at the drive-in. He was like, his eyes got real big. And I said, these movies exist because you did Night of the Living Dead. People that were involved with Night of the Living Dead, or fringe involvement, or people that were influenced by it, as 20 years went on to the late 60s, early 70s or whatever, into the 80s. I think it's almost 20 years. I don't know, 10 years. These folks were making their own movies, and Midnight and Effects are prime examples of local Pittsburgh horror filmmaking, probably as a result of the success of the independent work that was done with Night of the Living Dead. So that's why these movies are important. They're very important to the Pittsburgh area and to fans, because, there's a lot of young folks out there today which are trying to make movies that are influenced by these other films. And this is like an archaeological dig here. You've got these great movies that are time-stamped in Pittsburgh, and they're available for people to now see, in wide release, which they never were before.
Oh, yeah.
And I think Severin did the release for Midnight. It's beautiful. And I believe Agfa did the release for Effects, which when I saw that on VHS, I could never believe that film would ever come out on a Blu-ray release. There's a bunch of nice extras on that as well. And one more ironic note here. I want to cite, this is a very good Gene story. So I live very close to the Fern Hollow Bridge in Pittsburgh, which collapsed in January. Kind of made the international news. And that previous weekend, I had just gotten Effects on Blu-ray. And in one of the small films in that movie, there was the Fern Hollow Bridge, where a girl gets picked up. And I thought, and I'm sitting there looking at this on a Saturday before the bridge collapsed. I'm sitting there looking at the Blu-ray going, wow, that bridge sure has been there a long time. And boy, it still looks the same. And I wake up one morning to what sounded like the end of the world. And a dozen people texting me on the phone going, please tell me that you're not on that bridge. And it was just, to me, it was a real weird kind of coincidence. It's like, I'm not saying there's something paranormal about it, but I mean, what are the chances, right?
Right.
So there's a lot of great history in these movies, and these people that are coming out to the show, I hope that they realize that, and they're looking at it on a different level than just entertainment. There is definitely some historical significance to what we're doing, and certainly running these films back to back. So fingers crossed, right?
Yeah. And, I've said this before, especially like movies that take place in, for example, New York or London or any of these major cities. They're like time capsules. And it's so amazing to watch these 70s films because, it brings me back to when I was a kid and how things looked back then.
Yep. Well, the interesting thing about something like Midnight is like a lot of that area in Pittsburgh kind of looks the same, right, Gene? I mean, they don't. I mean, right? There's a lot of woodsy areas, and I think when that show's on the big screen, it's going to have a good feeling. It's going to give people, this like eerie feeling because it kind of reminds you of the surrounding woods and the surrounding area of the drive-in, even though it wasn't necessarily shot, right near Vandergrift, but there are areas that in that area that look, still pretty much like they did in this movie that was made 40 years ago.
That's
so
great.
that's
Right.
pretty
And-
interesting. Yeah.
And George officially licensed the Ghoul from the cover of Midnight. We were sitting around thinking what image would be wonderful for a T-shirt, and George said, "I think the Ghoul is it." So he was able to license it, and Bill Van from Groovy Doom Drive-In Asylum actually did the fonts on the bottom and everything, and the shirt came out beautiful.
Is that the one with the dude has like the executioner hood on?
No, it sort of looks like something from Creepshow, really. I mean,
okay.
He's a skull face, and he's holding like a chalice. And there were some female victims which were on the perimeter, and we removed the female victims because we didn't. We're not using the complete image, just part of the image, but it's actually licensed, so there's no copyright infringement there whatsoever.
Right.
Yeah, and the Ghoul is like within the movie, it's more of a mummified grandmother or
right, exactly.
head of the family,
yes.
like in a Texas Chainsaw Massacre type
exactly.
vein. But when you see the image, it just looks more like a generic kind of Ghoul, male or female. You really can't tell. But I just thought it was a great concept. I just thought it was great.
Nice.
And I wanted an image like that on the shirt. And since, like Gene was saying, we were able to license it, I said, we got to use this.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And then getting back to the first two films, there really isn't much to be said about them. They're both classic. Halloween 2 has probably been one of the most requested April Ghouls films from the beginning. George will tell you, and we were just actually waiting for a good version to be available.
We showed Halloween 3 last April, so we kind of go all over the map, but
right, exactly.
Yeah,
Nice.
Not that we had to show them in any kind of order.
Right.
Terror Train, no, because the original Halloween, that was actually screened quite a while ago at an earlier April Ghouls. Terror Train is just a really great film. I watch it every single New Year's. I'm not kidding you. It's part of my New Year's ritual because it takes place on New Year's.
Nice.
And it's such an underrated film. And once you listen to like the director and some of the commentary and stuff, you realize, of course, he was directly, I guess, in contact with John Carpenter about this movie and wanting to do a film that took place, all in one place and one night to save money. And they decided it was going to be a New Year's train ride. And actually, it's a pretty tight film, despite its 80s-esque, very 80s atmosphere. It's a good whodunit on a train to the very, very end. And it's kind of a surprise ending. When you know what? Come to think of it, George, it's kind of a surprise ending, like the surprise ending of last year's first movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
There's kind of a weird irony there that the ending of this film is very similar. Well, I mean, it's the second movie, but it's a Friday night movie like we had with the movie last year. I'm not going to name it. You guys figure that one out.
Yeah. It's funny because I saw Terror Train at the drive-in with my parents, and that scared the crap out of me.
Terror Train did.
Yeah.
It's Canadian, eh?
I saw that. I've never seen it in a drive-in. I've only seen it on DVD. And
yeah. Actually, I saw both that and Halloween 2 at a drive-in near Boston. But yeah, I love those. Now, on your Saturday schedule, you've got amazing lineup here. Like, as you mentioned, Evil Dead 2, Re-Animator, Dr. Butcher M.D., and Zombie 3. How did those three come together?
Well,
those four, I
the
should say.
Evil Dead 2, like Gene and I were talking about it, and like that just has to be shown because it's popular. Re-Animator is another one we've been throwing around. So we kind of went the zombie route, and Gene was the one that said, how about Dr. Butcher M.D.? And it kind of led into another Italian zombie film. And since we've shown Zombie, the original Fulci one, and Zombie is considered Zombie 2 in Italy, so Zombie 3 is really Zombie 2, or however you want to work that out.
Right.
But Zombie 3 is just an outrageous. Fulci only partly directed it, partially directed, I should say. But it's kind of a ridiculous movie, but it's like a roller coaster ride. So I think it's a good fourth movie that'll wake people up and if they're dozing at that point, which they shouldn't be.
And then, it was sort of afterwards. It's sort of like we were talking on the phone one night, and it's like there sort of was an unplanned, what do you call it, theme that went through it, because you have the Evil Dead, which aren't quite zombies, and then you have, Re-Animator, which is a mad scientist experimenting, zombie people, and then that's what happens in Dr. Butcher. The same theme, and then you've established sort of a tropical island with zombies. In that movie, and then in the last movie, that's exactly where they are. It was filmed in the Philippines. The reason for Dr. Butcher was this, because it's very similar in structure to Zombie, even including the cast and production. And I realized, I don't know, if you're a video collector, you'll be sitting around one night and you'll go, I need to see this movie. And then you go, oh my God, I don't have the Blu-ray for that. So in the middle of winter, I ordered Porno Holocaust. No, I do not have that. But I don't know why I said it. But anyway, Zombie Holocaust and Porno Holocaust is a whole other movie, and it's really bad.
I've seen that. Yeah,
that and Nights of the Erotic Dead or whatever. So anyway, Zombie Holocaust, Dr. Butcher. It's a very similar structure. It's filmed in New York. It's filmed. I think both of the films where they filmed at, George? Was it in the Caribbean or something? Or I'm drawing a blank here where they were filmed at.
Yeah, well, Zombie 3 was, and I think Dr. Butcher was partially. I know, like you said, parts of it was shot in New York, and probably a lot of studio stuff in Italy.
Well, right. And Dr. Butcher, it's that whole thing where you've got the zombies, and if you don't have zombies, you've got cannibals.
Right.
And cannibalism, when the Italians ran out of zombie ideas, the next thing they went for, which makes complete sense if you think about it, was cannibal films. So you always had that really horrible movie. Was it Jungle Holocaust or Cannibal Holocaust or something? So I always like to think that this movie is sort of Zombie meets that, a little more subdued. And
it's more subdued because, we've had people ask us, to show or asked us if we would show the Italian cannibal movies, and I just think they're a little too much.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to bring censorship into the show, but it's just we have certain, we don't want to go too far. And I think like, something like Cannibal Holocaust would definitely be too intense.
Right.
And too graphic.
And stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So,
and then,
but this one has the cannibals in there, but there's no animal stuff, and it's all fake. So you have
really gruesome medical murder things that goes on.
It's very gruesome.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And that's so perfect because it just is. It's delicious because it's like when we were in college, it would be the kind of thing where you'd have the party with your usual friends and you'd rent like a handful of VHS and you'd be going through these VHS, tapes, and then you'd be like, okay, we're going to watch Dr. Butcher, and we put it in, and then as it would roll on, it would just get more disgusting, and people were like, "Oh God!" And then you talk about it, and that's I think that George and I were laughing about it. I said it's so perfect for April Ghouls or whatever, because you're getting your shocks in on a big screen, and people are going to walk away and go, "Oh my God, what were they thinking?" And it's perfect. And then George picked Zombie 3, and then we were both laughing about that because it's like everything that's essential 80s. I mean, there's like women, big-haired women and tight suits, boom boxes, Jeeps.
It's late 80s, so we got the other end of the spectrum. Yeah.
Right.
And a floating cloud of death that turns people into zombies. And it also sort of breaks into that whole genre that was going on at that time of really bad Italian sci-fi, jungle movies or whatever. There was a bunch of Italian films that emulated, like, the I don't know why I said Conan, the Schwarzenegger films, rather. And it's just, and of course, the floating head. There's a decapitated head in that movie that flies around and bites people, which is just absolutely absurd. And it's all very 80s. It just has and it is the kind of thing, I mean, with our audience, They're half asleep. Some are high. Some are drunk. I think it's perfect for the last film. You know.
And
if
it's
that
funny.
doesn't destroy the rest of their brain cells, nothing will, right?
Right. And it's funny too because it's so 70s and 80s because like just glancing at the IMDb, Dr. Butcher, aka Zombie Holocaust, is also called Zombie 3.
Yes.
Yeah, well, there you go. Yeah, it gets very confusing.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like Escape from Planet 8.
It's an interesting movie.
Well, I mean, I guess they made the connection with Ian McCulloch in there.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I thought too. I mean, there's a he's a similar character in such a similar structure. I actually a couple of weeks ago watched Zombie and that movie back to back just for a comparison thing. One of our wonderful snowy weekends here in Western Pennsylvania, which by the way are still happening even though it's spring.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, our weather sucks. To be honest with you, I'm sure it's going to be great by the time we do the show. But I mean, we have these nice weeks all along with 70 degrees, and then on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, it's like 9 inches of snow. Merry Christmas in the middle of April or March.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been dreadful. I'm glad it's going to be ending, but I watched them back to back, and I thought, these films are very similar to one another. I didn't imagine it,
Yeah.
So
that's awesome.
Perfect.
That's so cool. I remember seeing one of the films you're showing, Re-Animator, in the theater. I begged my parents to take me to see it because that was around the time where movies were NC-17. And so I told my father, I convinced him, you go buy the tickets. Me and my mother will wait over on the other side of the theater here. So he went and bought the tickets, and then we went in because I think I was 16 at the time. And that was great. I mean, my mother and father loved horror movies, but the one thing they couldn't get over was the green fat lady jumping around at the end with no clothes on because she was a zombie. And every time I mention that movie, my mother just brings that up. That's the one thing she remembers. No regard for Lovecraft or Jeffrey Combs.
You had so are you an only child?
Yes, I was till I was 18.
Brothers and sisters.
Say that again?
Because I was an only child, and my dad used to be one of the victims that I would take me to these films, as we were talking about. And my dad took me to see the uncut Evil Dead in the theater, and I just remember the blood squirting everywhere out of the trap door or something that happened in that movie. I can't remember the specifics, and the look on his face, and he didn't say anything one way or the other about the movie. And I remember my mom asking him, how was the film? And my dad looked at her and said, never again. He needs to find someone else to take him to these movies. He wasn't upset by it. He just was like, it was not in his scope of entertainment,
That reminds me, around the same time, no kidding, poor dad. Around the same time, I had my parents do the same thing to take me to see Texas Chainsaw 2. And my mother was sitting between us, and at the very end of the movie, right after Leatherface is chasing the girl with the razor blade, slicing her legs up, my father leans across my mother to me and goes, "We are never going to see another movie like this again."
See what I mean? Exactly. I got very lucky. I was dating this guy at the time named Mark, and we're still very good friends to this day. And Mark was, we went to the movies every weekend, and we saw Demons together. We saw all these films together. We saw House by the Cemetery. It was really great. And Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. There were so many good. He was up for it. And we were like always at the theater seeing these crazy films. So thank God we were of age to be able to go ourselves, in the 80s, because my parents were done. My dad was, I think he was done after, I don't know, he took me to see, we saw The Fog together, we saw Halloween 3 together. I think my dad did, and anything that would have been probably pre-84, if I couldn't get in by myself, he probably took, or my aunt's really good friend that she worked with, she was a big horror fan. So I got into a lot of movies. I saw Altered States in the theater too, which was crazy. With a friend of mine he was actually older. He was 4 years older than me. He had to pretend to be my parent to get us in to see that. It was ridiculous. But
That's awesome.
I watched that like He did. He had to play my older brother. It was bizarre. And they actually asked you, you know, they're like, are you a legal parent or guardian? And he's like, yeah, I'm his brother. Anyway, we saw Altered States, and I'll tell you, I just saw that on Blu-ray like a couple weeks ago when William Hurt passed, and it still holds up. It's still an amazing film. It's just great. It's well produced.
Yeah.
Visually and the writing and everything. It's such a good movie. And, you know, if anyone, you know, has seen that on a big screen, it's an experience between the special effects and makeup effects and stuff. It's really psychedelic and scary.
Yeah. I remember seeing that in the
good
movies,
film.
and that scared the crap out of me, too.
Oh, I love that film. It was so good, you know. But yeah, and Ken Russell, of course, is effing crazy. You know that stuff. If you've seen any Ken Russell's bizarre films, Lair of the White Worm's another example of his extreme filmmaking, but another great film as well.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. And I heard a rumor that Hugh Grant may be the new Doctor Who on the TV show.
Yeah, that's going around, which is even stranger because it was ironic that Mark, who we were talking about, Mark texted me that, and I said, what's even more ironic is that Peter Capaldi already was Doctor Who, and he and Hugh Grant were together in Lair of the White Worm.
That's right, yep.
That's a weird combination.
And Hugh Grant did play Doctor Who once before in a comedy special with Rowan Atkinson back in '93. Yeah. I forget the title of it, but yeah,
I remember that.
Yeah.
You know, he's always been up for the role. They've always, every once in a while, I'm still following Doctor Who, and I have for decades. He's always been rumored up, you know, here and there. And I don't think he really had. I think his career was too big to be involved in Doctor Who. And I think the other thing was that with the new Doctor Who series that came back in 2005, I think it's become a lot more acceptable for celebrities, big name celebrities, to do Doctor Who, to be involved like John Hurt was and stuff. So, you know, I'd love to see Hugh Grant as the Doctor. I think he would be spectacular.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll know in 2 years.
Right? So one last thing I wanted to bring up before we wrap this up is, you know, you guys had mentioned on a previous show something that I love to hear, which is that every year you're finding more young people coming to these events and being exposed to films they probably haven't heard of before. I mean, I myself am still discovering movies, especially through your events, that I haven't heard of before, and I always thought I knew everything about horror movies. So can you guys speak to that a bit about the audience?
Yeah, well, the when we started the April show some years ago, we had to make it different than the September to prove, you know, to the Riverside Drive-In that we could bring in an audience, you know. So I really had to do some brainstorming. Well, I wouldn't say brainstorming necessarily, but just do something different than September. And so I said, well, let's go for like Friday the 13th and Day of the Dead and films like that, which we really hadn't shown before because the September show was mostly dedicated to the 60s and 70s type drive-in movies, drive-in horror films. Right. So when we started showing the 80s stuff, it was like, I couldn't believe like we had a whole new audience. So we just continued in that trend. And ever since we've been doing these April shows and showing a particular type of more modern horror film, I guess you could say, it's just brought in like younger and younger horror fans. And and a lot of them, like, you know, of course, were too young, you know, naturally to see these on the big screen because a lot of them were probably born after they were made. So, so they're just getting, and they love it, and they're just getting a great weekend of fun and being able to see these things on the big drive-in screen.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, when I went last year to April, oh sorry, go ahead, Gene.
I'm just saying, I'm supporting what George is saying. It's just that, you know, a lot of the demographic that we've found age-wise has been mostly 30s and 40-year-olds and we really ramped up this in the advertisement last April because, you know, you either snuck downstairs to watch the video when nobody would catch you, or you had a corrupt brother or sister who was older, or a neighbor or something that said, sure, you guys can come over and watch this. And, you know, you're finding this new renewed interest in these movies And you know, and real quick here, side note, I think that you see that happening with these reboots in modern filmmaking. I see, you know, this Texas Chainsaw Massacre reboot that just came out was one of the worst things ever. People like to argue about the merits of it. It's complete, utter garbage.
Right.
And I hardly ever have an opinion that's that strong, but it's awful. And, you know, the new Scream movie, I sat through that and just was bored shitless. And I think that these movies that we're seeing these reboots of are trying to renew an interest like it's the first time that these younger people have ever seen these films the way we did when we saw them in the theater. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
It's like, am I making sense about this?
Well,
like,
yeah, I mean, it goes to the fact that they named it Scream, which is the same title as the original, and it's not a remake. It's a continuation.
Right, and, you know, I liked the new Ghostbusters. I did. I really thought it was nice, the Afterlife
yes,
thing.
That was very
good. I found a warm place for that. But it was the same as the first movie, just redone with new people. And dawned on me while I was watching that, I go, you know what they're doing? They're taking the elements that I grew up with at that age, and they're presenting them in a different fashion for the people that are in that age group now. That's what happened with the Star Wars reboots, too. So I see that happening with these horror films. And like George was saying, there's a renewed interest in these older movies because of that. I mean, it's just the way things are trending. But you would be surprised, the young people that know these obscure films. It's shocking.
Oh, yeah.
You know, when they're like, oh, my God, Midnight. And I'm like, oh, my God, how the hell did you know about that movie?
Right.
You know, so.
Yeah, it's awesome. And, you know, when I was there last April, it was just amazing to see not just, you know, single people or couples or whatever, but families enjoying it. And just watching these movies on a nice night under the stars was just amazing. You know?
Yes.
So,
absolutely.
Awesome, guys. So is there anything else you wanted to mention about this event?
It's just, you know, T-shirts are available. You know, check out our community page, Drive-In Super Monster-Rama. Events, online tickets are available.
And throw us the dates again.
This is Friday, April 29th, and Saturday, April 30th. A big weekend of fun. Overnight camping available for an additional
free breakfast.
$10 only.
I should say free breakfast, but included with that camping fee is a breakfast.
Yep.
Which is awesome. People are marveling about that.
Yeah.
And you know, what else was I going to say about this? Oh, and we've got a great soundtrack coming up for this show too.
Excellent.
So, every time I see Midnight, I keep thinking of Judas Priest, Living After Midnight. And I have scandalously legally used that clip on Instagram for the 15-second stories for Living After Midnight with the monster. Maybe kind of has an Iron Maiden thing going on. I don't know, but whatever. I just, again, before we go, I want to close by saying, thank you, George, for allowing me to be part of this. I look forward to it every year. It's great for my creativity and my mental health. This is like a family thing. We all get together twice a year. And there's no malice involved in this production and with the fans and everything. It's just everybody gets along very, very well together, and it's just a good experience. I mean, it just really is. I'm thankful for that. I think I'm more excited about just being part of it all than actually probably watching movies. It's a weird thing to say, but really it is. It's not that I don't enjoy them. It's just great to see everybody.
Oh yeah, Gene has done a lot to change the show in the right direction. Give as far as publicity and just all kinds of different elements to expand to expand it, to make it more popular, to get it to the right audience. When I started, I was more bashful about the whole thing. And
he wouldn't come out to even take a picture with me. That's the God's honest.
And Gene kind of like. That's why he stepped in as what a journalist called marketing director. So ever since then, he's been given that title, and he deserves it. So
That's awesome.
And I told George, I said, it's so funny because George was so elusive. He would move from his car to the booth and back, and sometimes get food. Who is this Bigfoot? Who is George?
Well, I think in the early days, I was like, kind of like just. Well, just worried about how people are going to take to it.
Yeah.
I was just worried about how people were going to take to it. Not that they were taking to it badly. They were mostly having a good time and enjoying themselves. But I got, I needed to.
You were developing a very big. George is very, very. I don't know if it's shy that you are. It's just that you're not interested in the spotlight. You're very happy with what you do, and every show was like, where is this George? I need to meet George, and he's behind this. It's like the Wizard of Oz or whatever, and then. He started like.
I wanted to be like Swan in Phantom of the Paradise.
There you go.
Correct. Exactly.
Awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
Exactly. And I'm like, I told him one time during a conversation, I said, you need to get out and shake hands because you have so many admirers. It's ridiculous. You gotta go meet these people, whether you're shy about it or not. They're so. It's just people. It wasn't like an ego trip. It was just nice people that would come out to this and say, man, I'd love to meet this guy that did this.
Right.
And that's what it was all about. And that's really what cultivates the whole warm family feeling is that everybody, people talk, every day to us practically. George has like a little group going for the Brad's Hideaway.
And you guys make tons of people happy with this, So you should be.
I hope so.
I think so. I believe so. Yeah, that's the whole purpose. Yeah.
So you guys should be proud of what you're putting
what?
together. Go ahead, Gene.
And it's and it's 2 shows a year, and that's more than enough. It's like it's not overkill, and it's sort of like when you're. It's sort of like when you're in a good rock band and you make people wait. You know what I mean? You're just not going to churn out garbage constantly. It's George's work with the theater, with this whole thing, has been more about the quality than the quantity of it. It's so much more valuable when it's once or twice a year and people can look forward to it and the hype, and it happening. And honest to God, there's like young people that come to this and they have this look of bewilderment like, I'm here. I'm at a Monster-Rama. And to me, that's so bizarre. You know what I mean? It's like, really? This is what it's about? Okay, do it.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
You don't foresee yourself as that, and I know George doesn't, and I don't. You don't foresee yourself as that person that's created or done this. You just simply don't, and it turns your head a little bit. It's a very emotional thing. It's a good feeling.
Yeah,
is what it is, and that's another reason why it's done. So,
well, that's amazing.
Beautiful.
And I just want to thank you guys for coming on the show again, and we'll have to talk again about other stuff, other movies and stuff, and then maybe, obviously, in the fall, we'll get back together and talk about your next event.
We'd like to see you again. Get inside that car and drive down here.
I know. It's a lot of logistics involved, but
I know that. Well, whatever.
So the listeners can get tickets from your Facebook page. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, go to the Drive-In Super Monster-Rama page. There'll be a link to the Riverside's website where you could buy advance online tickets for this. And there's information about the T-shirts also on our page. It's an exclusive T-shirt. It's a limited run. It's going to sell out fast.
Excellent.
Yeah, they do. They sell out like crazy.
We'll put the link in the show notes here so people can find it easy.
Yeah,
all right.
It's there. And if they have any questions, we're more than glad to answer questions in terms of the two options are it's $7 pretty much flat rate for the orders if you want it sent by mail, or you can reserve for pickup at the event, which is highly suggested because I know in September, by the middle of the evening, a lot of the bigger sizes were completely gone. We were very lucky to have enough shirts to stretch through Saturday night. They sold that quickly.
Wow.
So
that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Awesome, guys. Well, thank you so much, and we'll talk to you again soon.
All right, thank you.
Yep, thank you, Roger. Always a pleasure.
Same here.
Always a pleasure.
Okay, folks, please be sure to check out the April Ghouls Drive-In Monster-Rama Facebook page. And if you can attend, please do and support their show so that George and Gene can keep doing it for years to come. If you want to chime in about our show, please send us feedback to thenisnow42@gmail.com. And please check out our revamped Patreon page so you can listen to our exclusive Filmmaker series only available there, as well as get some other cool stuff. The Patreon and TeePublic links can be found at our website, havenpodcasts.com. If you like this show, please go wherever you download your podcast from and leave us a great review so that more listeners can find it. And check us out on YouTube at youtube.com/user/UncleDeath1. Thanks for joining us today. Class dismissed.
Then Is Now podcast is intended for entertainment, educational, and informational purposes only. Sounds, music, and clips played during this podcast are the property of their copyright holders. All original content is copyright Jupiter Media.
For more shows like the one you just heard, check out the Dorkening Podcast Network at thedorkening.com.